So Nintendo introduced us to the concept of game key cards, physical game releases that essentially just, bring you to a download screen. They don't actually have the games on the cards. We were a little bit worried about this, and then it turned out that we were right to be worried because it seems that almost all bigger third-party Switch 2 games are going to be game key card releases, at least at this time. It seems it is going to be a very common thing, which is unfortunate. And it's possible that Nintendo just wanted to give developers this option because they knew that paying for storage, for just paying for the physical cards themselves was going to be a bit of a problem, just as it has been in the past. Probably going to be even more of a problem because games are just getting bigger and bigger, and yet the cards probably just aren't getting that much cheaper to produce. So it's possible that they just said, hey, we think people are probably going to want this, so they gave us the option, and then it turned out that yes, most developers are going to want that. But now there's a worrisome rumor going around that a lot of this may be Nintendo's fault, that they may be essentially creating this problem by giving developers very limited options for how to package their games, kind of forcing them into it. It seems that the company Arc System Works has been hacked, and within that hack, people have found a bunch of information about Switch 2 related stuff. And according to leaker Necrolipe, they have found information suggesting that game studios selling their games on Switch 2 essentially only have 3 options. You can do a digital-only release to keep things simple. You can use a game key card, so you don't have to worry about storage at all. Or you have to choose the big, fat 64 gigabyte cartridge. Like basically, this rumor is saying that the 64 gigabyte card is the only option, and on the original Switch, developers had a choice between an 8 gigabyte card and a 16 gigabyte one, so there was obviously there was a price difference there. If you had a smaller game, you could go for the smaller card, you could save a little bit of money, but now the idea is that everyone is being if you want your game on a card at all, and it's not a game key card, you gotta go with a 64 gigabyte card. And again, I don't know how much the manufacturing prices have changed over the years. I really don't know what that looks like. But I can imagine that, a 64 gigabyte proprietary little cartridge, it probably would cost a bit. So yeah, the idea here is that Nintendo is basically forcing everyone to go with game key cards. Anyone who doesn't want to go all digital, especially if you're releasing a big game, like it's a big third-party port, of course you're gonna want to release it physically. But I don't know, say your game isn't even that big. Nintendo's games aren't even that big. DK Bonanza would fit on one of the original Switch cards. So here, if your only option is a 64 gigabyte card, then naturally that would mean that most, if not all, companies would be opting for the game key card release. So if this is true, then it would mean that the whole game key card thing was very, very understandable. And it would also mean that, it's essentially Nintendo's fault. It's not just an option that they gave everyone and then everyone decided to do it because it was the cheapest thing. It would basically be if you want to make a pretty good amount of profit on this game at all, if you don't want a dramatic cut into your profits, then you got to go game key card. However, sorry to disappoint anyone who had their shame on you wagon fingers all warmed up and ready to wag at Nintendo for being evil. It seems this may not be true. I'm seeing plenty of people claim that Necrolipe does not exactly have the best track record, and there's a perfectly fine chance that in this case, he's kind of filling in the blanks, taking some information and kind of coming to a conclusion about it that may not be accurate. And while on the one hand, again, this would explain things, and there is a game key card situation, it is something that everyone is choosing to do, but at the same time, it would be weird. It really would be weird if Nintendo is fitting their own games, their own games are really not that big at all, and yet they are demanding that everyone else only uses this big, just the maximum size of game cartridge. So big that Nintendo themselves will never even need half of it. And yet that's the only option for everyone else. It doesn't seem super reasonable, and therefore it doesn't seem super likely. At the same time, you could argue maybe it is decently likely because Nintendo themselves will save money by manufacturing like nothing but one kind of card, you know, making just a bunch of just the basic 64 gigabyte, and they make it big enough so that, like, yeah, pretty much any game is gonna fit on there. If it's bigger than that, then like they're gonna go with a game key card release anyway. So let's make sure that if someone really does want to fit the game on a cartridge, they've got enough space. But then on the other hand, Nintendo is passing the cost onto the developers themselves. They are making the developers basically purchase these cards and, you know, eat the cost. So then why would Nintendo want to go with just like one simple, easy option? It's not really going to save them money. They're not the ones who are paying for these cards. They pay for them initially, I guess, but then like I don't know how the whole process works. I don't know if they charge the developers or I really don't know. Basically, I'm just saying it is technically possible. At the same time, though, it really doesn't seem worth assuming that this is true, as much as it is fun and feels great to wag that finger at Nintendo. In this case, yeah, I'm not willing to jump to this conclusion just yet. I think it's probably more likely that it's just the fact that these cards are cutting into profits at all, you know? Even if there are multiple tiers, even if there is a cheaper cartridge option, what if they still had an 8 or a 16 gigabyte one, and maybe those are more affordable? I think we're just getting to the point now, especially with money as tight as it is and everything. I think everyone just wants to do game key cards because they're like, Nintendo said we could. It's a thing. We're all looking around and everyone else is doing it. So like, we're just gonna do it. It's like, you get the physical game, but we save money, and people will grumble about it, but it's not gonna affect sales. There will be some people who say, I'm not gonna do it, I'm only gonna buy physical if it's actually on the cartridge, but it's not gonna be enough people. It just isn't. Things like this, they really do not tend to actually affect sales, so I think it's more likely that people are all going game key cards because it's just, they can. Just because they can, you know? The further and further we get, the more and more companies are able to do this stuff, and the more we just kind of learn to deal with it. You know, we're all frogs in the slowly boiling water. We learn to accept worse and worse practices, and hey, more power to you if you put your foot down and you say, I'm done, I'm not taking anymore. Like, that's cool. There should be more people like you, honestly. But I don't know. Jury's still out on this one. So, there you go.